what was your inspiration to start Braintrust?
So I have been working in education for over a decade, primarily in New York City. And those experiences ranged from being a classroom teacher at a special ed school to working privately as a tutor for students who have various learning differences, to then running a New York City-based tutoring company prior to Braintrust. And throughout all of those experiences, the central problems that I identified were the fact that there are so many teachers that want to tutor and to help students and that have these unique training and abilities that add so much to the learning experience for students. And then there are so many families that need the support of those teachers, but it's so difficult for the two parties to connect. Jen and I met because I was her daughter's tutor many moons ago, and we got along wonderfully and kept in touch and, transitioned from sort of client students to friends. And I had this moment of realizing a potential way to try and solve this problem. And I came to Jen and she immediately was like, yes, let's do it. This is perfect. Because it's a problem that she experienced herself and, knows all too well.
Yeah, for sure. I think personal experience, makes a big difference when you're starting something.
Yeah, I mean, it was really just dumb luck. And I've said this a few times now that I was actually connected to Mara in the first place. Right. My neuropsych gave me a list of tutors and they gave me a list of tutors. And just fortuitously, one tutor on that list was kind of specified for downtown. And I was like, oh my God, this is the person who we need to meet with because she's downtown.
Right.
And when Mara called me with this idea, it was a big light bulb moment of kind of synthesizing all of the problems that we both experience from different sides.
Right. No, of course. Yeah. It's great that you guys came together and formed this. So with the ever changing evolution of tutoring, specific challenges tutors can face with their clients and vice versa, were there any challenges you guys at Braintrust have come across? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, I mean, that's a broad question because there's so many challenges when you start a business. I would say, from a granular level, there's the question of educating your client, right? We're looking at a population of parents. Some of them are very well versed. They know that their child has a language-based learning issue or ADHD, and they come to us with that alphabet soup, right? They come to us with all of these terms that we use, the shorthand. Then you have a whole host of other parents who are out there and they're going, well, I don't know, my child just isn't reading well, or they're not grade level, or they're not performing. So before we can even have a great working product, we really need to make sure that we're always educating our parents. And I would say that's, it's a worthy challenge because you really want the parent population to be as well versed and able to take care of their children and provide those academic opportunities. But it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think any business, regardless, is a challenge. I mean, nothing's perfect. So when it comes to learning differences and children, there's clearly many different styles. What is your approach with your tutors to helping the child that maybe is more unique or unique in comparison to others?
Yeah. So, on the one hand, our vetting process holds teachers accountable for identifying very clearly what their training and certifications and experience looks like with addressing specific learning challenges, so that we're not necessarily going to recommend a teacher who has gen ed experience but is familiar with ADHD for a child who has a diagnosis of ADHD and executive function issues. Instead, we're set up so that teachers who have that unique training are matched with students who have a specific need for the expertise that the teacher has. Right. Because, not all teachers are created equal in terms of their strengths and the things that they feel passionate about teaching and the things that they have vast amounts of experience, learning issues in the classroom. So, we have set up the platform to be able to recommend teachers who have unique training for supporting students with dyslexia, for example, because they have experience and training with Orton-Gillingham methods, or teachers who have training in specific executive function interventions as the recommended supports for a child who has ADHD. So our specific focus is on learning disabilities and helping to match teachers who are trained in the specific research-based interventions to support those learning differences with the students who need them.
I think that's so unique. I wish my tutors when I was in high school and college were you guys, because I think it also, being matched with somebody, which I find is the most unique thing about you guys, with somebody that is either is educated and knows firsthand about the challenges that the student is facing is super important, because I do find, and I found this a lot with my tutors, that, there was kind of sometimes, the challenge of you don't necessarily understand what I'm going through. And I encounter it on a regular basis when it comes to just things in general. But I think support, is really crucial, and it's really important for the other person to understand the person who has the difference.
Yeah, and I think that, the whole point of all of the research that's been done in education is to understand how to teach children according to how their brain works.
Right.
And, there's a neuropsychological basis for all of these diagnoses. Right. And so using that knowledge and that understanding to be able to identify the best practices and approaches for each brain means that you don't have to have the trial and error of trying to figure out what works, which so many teachers go through when they're learning how to teach a student, because, there are these magical programs when you are able to go through additional training that make such a profound impact on the students in a tutoring session.
Yeah, of course. And do you guys use any multisensory techniques or assistive devices with your students?
Yeah, so we try to integrate all of those things into tutoring sessions. It's certainly the case that, we've all had to learn how to teach and operate and communicate in totally unique ways as a result of the pandemic. But
that's a huge thing now.
But
I don't think about it because I'm not in school, so I don't even think about breaks and this and that. But no, it's a huge thing. Anyways, continue.
Yeah. So it's been an interesting thing learning how to create a multisensory learning experience through a screen. But at the same time, I think that so many of our educators understand and appreciate the fact that a multisensory learning experience is central to the academic success of the student and the instruction. So it might be something as simple as having students write with pen and paper and closing the computer just enough so that the tutor is still able to see what a student is working on using, the same sort of simple tools that all of the, very young students need to use in order to be successful, versus using more advanced technology in sessions with older students and being able to take advantage of video content, which can really easily be integrated into the learning experience, or being able to use dictation or Google Docs and all of sort of the visual tools that we can bring in that really help to give so much more impact to the words that we share with each other. So, a multisensory learning experience is definitely central to what we try and provide for all of our students, but the specific methodologies and approach really varies a lot according to the student's needs and also the age.
Yeah, no, of course. And there's definitely there's many different approaches. There's different techniques that need to be used because one case or one child is not the same as another.
Yeah, it's that individualization that makes the learning experience so powerful for the students. And so thinking of the ways in which we can use sort of the tools and training we have at our disposal to be a great fit for the interests and strengths and challenges a student has, is what is going to make for a successful learning experience.
Yeah, of course. So one thing that you guys, that's again unique about you guys, is you work with the parent or guardian in terms of helping your child or their child find the right tutor. What is this process like? Your work with, the parent or guardian?
Sure. So we really have two ways of helping families find the right match for them. On the one hand, we have built the Braintrust platform in order to be able to think like a learning specialist in terms of making recommendations for a tutor. So we have a range of built-in filters that parents can use to find their way to an appropriate match. And so many families understand that their child is struggling, but have a hard time understanding how or why their child is struggling. So one of the sets of questions that we include in those filters are specific questions having to do with how is your child struggling with a given topic or skill that a parent identifies. So in that way, we're going beyond simply saying my child is struggling with 7th grade math to being able to identify my child is struggling with word problems or math-backed automaticity. And that is what is making 7th grade math so challenging.
Right.
Or, my child is struggling with reading, but it's not just reading, it's sounding out words and being able to spell words, which helps our system identify that your child needs the support of somebody who has training in a multisensory phonics program, as opposed to just a reading teacher that has experience helping 2nd or 3rd graders. So on the one hand, all of those search features are built in order to think like a learning specialist, in order to make a match like a learning specialist at scale. At the same time, we also have a nice little pop-up widget so that if a parent is struggling or feels as if the search filters that we have, which also include different sorts of disabilities, learning disabilities or ADHD, if a parent needs more customized support, we are always available to set up a meeting with a parent, understand the specific unique circumstances of their situation, and help them connect with a teacher who is able to provide the support that they need.
Right. And I think that's great. Now, what happens, and you guys worked with me, this would definitely be something that would work with my mom, as supportive as she is. But what happens if you encounter a parent or a guardian who literally does not know what to do in terms of filters, is not necessarily willing to be as open, and they're just like, well, hi Mara and Jen, can you please find me a tutor for my child, she has ADHD.
That's not uncommon. That's not uncommon,
no, I know that. It's a challenge.
Well, so listen, the point of Braintrust, as Mara said, is to really empower, the parents so that they have ownership in this process instead of, kind of deferring to somebody else. But we understand that sometimes in the beginning of a process, a parent can feel insecure about this, right? They've never been in this spot before, and they don't know what they don't know. So that kind of goes back to that earlier question about the challenges in terms of, structuring this enterprise. And, the good news is Mara has done this for a long time. So she's kind of like Oz in the back. If we need her, we can open the curtain and there she is, to lend her assistance. And a lot of what we have in our technology is really a to scale extension of what Mara did. So, obviously from the parent perspective, I'm here to lend support. And from the educator perspective, Mara can lend so much of her professional expertise. But we are very aware that as we speak to different people, they want to have that level of comfort to know that there's a person behind the business.
Absolutely. No. And that's why you guys work together. There's usually always one that specializes one thing, one focuses on another thing. That's part of having a company. So a child's learning process and learning different disability is always unique, as we spoke about. How do you and your tutors measure a child's learning process and their growth and development by working with you guys?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things for a good relationship with anybody is communication. And we have really built communication into the core of our business and the way in which teachers and parents interact. So after every single tutoring session, tutors on Braintrust log a session report, and that session report names specific skills that were addressed during session, the student's level of mastery, whether it was something that perhaps they were really familiar with before, so it was smooth and easy. It was something that they worked on during the meeting but didn't quite master and needs more reinforcement, or something that they were able to master over the course of the session, and therefore, we can wrap it up and move on to the next skill. And in that way, the platform actually creates a progress report so that parents have a view into baseline entry level plus the specific notable gains that a child has made as a result of those tutoring sessions. And it also gives parents insight into the overall scope of all of the skills that a child needs to learn in order to sort of be able to check off first grade math skills or calculus. So in that way, we're not just saying, your child's doing great and things are going really well. Trust us, it's all wonderful, but really being able to provide measurable results and help parents to understand and track their child's progress over time to create that transparency and also trust, so that we can have a good relationship both with the family and with the students, and hopefully also with the school and any other specialists that are supporting these children, because as you know, it really takes a village. And we have our session report set up so that they can automatically be shared with any party that the parent chooses, so that not only are we communicating that progress to the parents after every single session, but those reports can automatically go to classroom teachers or the speech language pathologist or the occupational therapist, whoever it may be, to really create a more collaborative approach to supporting each student.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And so what advice would you give to a parent or guardian to help reinforce their child's learning growth?
So I think that the most important thing is consistency. And, we in the session reports try and communicate goals that we are working on or recommendations for how to reinforce skills between sessions. And the most important thing that a parent can do is to read that advice and do their best to try and put those recommendations in place. As a teacher and a parent, I completely appreciate how challenging those two things can be. And the role of a tutor is very different than the role of a teacher. But at the same time, there are always ways to make, I think, simple recommendations that also help to make it easier for parents to do their part. Because that structure and routine and consistency is the thing that helps students to feel more secure, to feel more confident, and to feel more able themselves. Right. And the more opportunities they have to practice a given skill, the more likely they are to develop fluency with it. So, if I feel like so many times there's that thing of in a tutoring session, or not in a tutoring session, but in homework, a parent tries to help and the child is like, you don't get it. That's not how they do math now. Mm-hmm. Or that's not how my teacher taught me to do it. And, so often parents don't have that access to see how it's done in the classroom. But the beauty of a tutoring session is that they do. And through those session reports, we can really explain that, because a parent not only gets a tutor to help their kid sort of in the moment, but they also get an ally and a support system that's built in as a resource to help them be a better parent outside of school and outside of those tutoring sessions as well.
Right. It's, again, just so unique. So you were recently showcased on Good Morning America. The feature discussed the goal of Braintrust, demonstrate your dedication in assisting parents, guardians to find a unique learning experience for their child. And address the difficulties parents are facing with the quote unquote new normal of education. The disabled community faces learning challenges within their school environment, and each school year, with classroom materials, poor staffing, lacking properly the modified educational spaces, etc. How does the new normal add to these challenges for people or for children with differences?
I think if we would have been at this time last year, it would have been a different answer, right? I could have gone on and on about how the, different learning profile student population is often neglected and they don't get the resources they need. And I mean, we could talk a lot about that educational policy. I think fast forward to where we are right now, almost every child is a special needs child. Because if you look at the landscape, you have had children who have not had structured learning since March. Well, what does that do for a population that is already operating below that standard of average? So you're creating a dire situation. And your question is, how do you reconcile all of that? The answer is, I don't know. Sure, you can have tutoring and that can bridge some gap. That's great. But that's not going to remediate the deficit that the schools have provided or failed to provide. So, it's kind of this perfect storm that I hope will ultimately bring attention to the current structure of our school system and how they operate. Because, taking the temperature of the landscape right now, it's not very good for students. It's really not. This is a very difficult time to be a student, especially in New York City.
Of course, absolutely. New York City in general is like so competitive. So depending upon what's, I'm just saying, so there's that added pressure. With remote learning right now, due to this pandemic, how have you guys adapted your tutoring services for the client? Zoom? Do you guys also do groups now? I don't know now with a little bit more of social distancing if you guys meet in person, but how has the whole process been adapted?
So we're primarily working with students remotely via Zoom.
Okay.
We are offering learning pod support for small groups of families just because there are so many teachers that did not feel safe returning to the classroom, both for health reasons, but also just like mental health reasons, because it is overwhelming being a teacher and having to juggle the constant changes that are thrown at you. And there are some remote classrooms that have up to 64 students in them. And, the challenges of doing that are just unimaginable. So we do have some teachers that have contacted us to try and work with small groups of students and offer in-person learning opportunities, of course, with safety precautions that are determined on an individual level by each group. But the majority of our work one-on-one is certainly remote. And what I will say is that I personally was definitely nervous about having to transition to remote learning just because it's a huge change that none of us expected. But what I'll also say is that we are so lucky to be living in a time when so many of us are so familiar with engaging and having conversations through screens, right? Like we talk on FaceTime with grandparents and with friends that are far away. And I think what so many of us educators have learned is the fact that the tutoring session is really like a conversation far more than it is a class experience in the sense that remote teaching is. And so in that way, the transition, while it was like a big step to take it, has not been a big step in terms of the nature or the quality of instruction. It's, through a screen, but it's still just as like warm and intimate and effective as those in-person sessions were.
Right. And I think everyone's learning how to adapt. I mean, Different Enable has been booming because we've now adapted to Zoom. I don't know if Zoom, if we were in a typical regular, style of life where there was no pandemic, these interviews would actually be much harder. I don't even know how I would have adapted. And it's like a new way of living. You guys are learning the pros and the cons and just kind of figuring it out in the process like everyone else is. So where do you see Braintrust going in the next 10 years? What are some of your goals that you'd like to still accomplish?
Well, At Braintrust, we love big picture goals. We love that because, you want to dream big and you want to start with a very structured plan. So right now, of course, our go-to-market approach is to really empower teachers. And, our philosophy is the more empowered the teacher feels in our environment, the better the product will be in terms of that level of education and academic access and development to the student. But, that's just one rung on the ladder that we hope to climb. So, there's a lot of other layers in terms of providing support for the whole child in this space. So our first population is, of course, those who learn differently, right? So dyslexia, ADD, ADHD, executive function issues. And then, you can easily graduate to, speech language pathology, right? Occupational therapy, because these are a host of support services that can really develop the whole child. Mm-hmm. And, as we look down the road, there's so much opportunity to maybe shape policy. Just in doing my analysis of New York State education and literacy policy, I am very disheartened the more I learn. I would love for Braintrust to end up somehow, in Albany, really changing policy to the betterment of the students of the state. Mm-hmm. Maybe down the road, as we get the grass under our feet, maybe we want to develop a school that supports these type of children if we're embracing this online community. You don't need a brick and mortar school anymore. Of course. Let's put it this way. When we started this business, we weren't like, hey, let's design a school and change.
Of course not. You have to start small and then you go big.
Correct. But, the more you learn about the landscape, the more you begin to see, wow, there's so many things that need to change to benefit the children. And what can we do to benefit kids? Right. So sky's the limit. Every week we are really taking small steps that lead to big steps. And, I'm very proud of where Mara and I have ended up. And it's been 4 or 5 months, but it's been pretty amazing what we've been able to put out there.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely incredible. Lastly, can you tell us, a memory or like some type of or a story where you've seen, a child grow to nth degree and now they're college or have made some big stride that maybe the parent did not or guardian did not think would happen prior to coming to you guys?
I mean, I can speak from my own perspective.
Okay, so there you go. Yeah.
I will tell you, and this kind of goes back to when we were originally speaking, when you get a diagnosis from a neuropsych, this kind of cold, calculated medical document mm-hmm. that puts a lot of labels on your child, you lose a little ground beneath your feet. It's very unsettling. And, seeing what Mara was able to do with my daughter and to give her confidence and a voice and yet still be very firm, right? Like Mara wasn't taking it from my daughter. Children who kind of navigate within the system become very stubborn and they become very closed off to anything new because they don't want to feel like they don't know anything. It's not a good feeling for them. And, to cajole and push and support and let the child feel safe so that they begin to take risks, so that they begin to be receptive to new academic developments and milestones. It's remarkable. And, my daughter's now in 10th grade. Her average is, I think it's 95. I mean, it's something insane. So I still give her a hard time. I'm like, it should be 100. But
do you mind sharing where she goes to school?
No, she goes to Dwight. And
she goes to Dwight.
I love it.
It's funny. I almost transferred to Dwight. Dwight's an amazing school.
And she almost went to Hewitt. So I find this very funny. But they have been amazingly supportive of her. And, when you finally get that person who gets you, mm-hmm. and then you're able to spread your wings a little bit more and find the school that fits your profile. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful it's a beautiful graduation. It's lovely to see. And I mean, Mara, I only have that one experience. Mara has tutored many, many similar children who've gone on to great things.
Yeah, I have one student who comes to mind. I was his third grade classroom teacher when I first started teaching, and he's now a junior in college, I want to say. Wow. And I definitely haven't tutored him all the way through, but I've been in his life supporting him in some capacity through that entire period of time. And I laugh when I see him because I used to go over to his house for tutoring sessions, and his mom would make chocolate chip cookies while we sat on his bed surrounded by stuffed animals. And we talked about Harry Potter so that we could work on reading comprehension, because those were all of the things that he loves so much. And now he's like a buff man who is doing amazingly well, but remains sweet as can be and continues to just reach out for help if and when he needs it, and just guidance. And I feel like just, it goes back to the power of those relationships that you are able to establish when you have that one-on-one connection, that the tutor, like, you call them a tutor because we don't have a better word for it, but really, you become that child's ally and advocate and mentor, and you become a part of a family. It's an amazing journey, and I feel like it's why every teacher gets into teaching. And I feel so lucky to have the opportunity to do what I do in the field of education, because it is so fulfilling. And the fact that we are able to create these opportunities and experiences for other students and other families is the best gift ever.
Yeah, and watching them grow is super important. Well, thank you so much for this